Good day, Trinidad and Tobago, the Caribbean, and the world. Welcome to this episode of Strictly Legal on WESN, Content Capital. I am your host, Rondell, Donawa, attorney at law. Once again, I'm happy to bring the law and you. Of course, today is a bit of a somber mood as we speak about a look into the workplace relating in light of the Paria incident. Now, over the weekend, the country united, hoping for a miracle that 4 men could have made it out of a pipeline alive at the Paria facility. Unfortunately, this was not the outcome we had prayed for. And of course, on behalf of WSN, we extend our deepest condolences to their families and pray their healing during this trying time. Now, working in the energy industry can be considered one of the most hazardous profession on earth. And of course, confined spaces are ranked in the top 5 leading occupational hazards in the oil and gas industry. And risk mitigation is, of course, a continuous process. Now, via the web, I do have a guest, a very experienced attorney. He's a member of parliament as well for Shogunas West. His name is Dinesh Rambally. He is an attorney at law of over 19 years experience, which has included selfless humanitarian efforts as he consistently fought for the rights, well-being, and way of life of citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Over the years, he has specialized in many various areas of law, including civil litigation, commercial corporate law. And in 2011, he became a member judge of the Industrial Court of Trinidad and Tobago. And in 2016, he returned to private practice. You will have seen him a lot on TV, in Parliament, etc. Today, we are going to speak about the issue of the Paria incident and workplace liability. Good morning, Mr. Rambally.
Morning, Mr. Donawa. Good morning to your viewers and your listeners. Certainly my pleasure to be joining you this morning. Albeit the circumstances in which we are joining each other, I want to join with you at the outset that really the country, I am confident and I do believe the country was, ad idem, and their hearts, there was a unity in purpose in terms of, wishing with prayers and goodwill and, well wishes on the part of everyone that we could have had at least the safe, and securing the safe return of these divers who were involved in this unfortunate incident last week, Friday. So I want to join with you in extending condolences at the outset to the families. I know this is something which, it is very tragic for them, but by extension, the community at large would feel it as well. So my condolences. As it would happen, the last diver who was found to be found earlier this morning, I think it was 12:36 a.m., according to one of the releases that I saw. It is a close relative of one of my constituents. I didn't know that before until this morning. And I did hear from the constituent. It is her nephew, and, Rishi Nagasa. And, when I spoke to them, to the family members, I think they're very much distraught. So I told them that I could only imagine at this point in time what it is they're really going through. So condolences. And I am certainly keeping, and I hope everyone is doing that as well, keeping them in prayers as we move forward.
Indeed, we have to. And of course, as I was saying before we started this interview, that actually one of the gentlemen, Kazim Ali Jr., who we fondly known in St. Benedict's College as Mr. Bean, he passed away as well. And it is indeed unfortunate. And my question, of course, the beginning is, how did we get here, Mr. Rambally? I mean, there's so many questions, there's so many information in the public domain. There are a lot of public commentators, those who are informed, uninformed. I think the country itself is a bit enraged. So how did we get to this point where 4 men are now dead?
Well, I think, Mr. Donovan, I think where we need to start with this is that how did we get here? It seems as though in Trinidad and Tobago, we have adopted a culture, and it is a culture of, either underestimating risk or a culture of, unnecessarily exposing oneself to risk. So whether it be within the pandemic, I have seen scenes recently where in the pandemic, we are still in the pandemic, and I have seen scenes over this last weekend, whilst on the one hand, There were those who were praying and hoping and grieving over, this particular situation that we are discussing this morning. The demise of these divers. Certainly as of Friday and Saturday, we were still very hopeful. By Sunday, we didn't know what to think. And by Monday, unfortunately, things didn't really start to unfold how we wanted it. But the point is, on the one hand, you had members of the community, doing something. And whilst we were, in a sense, hoping and wishing for the best, sorry, what you had was you had a large, I have to say, a contingent of the population, in my humble opinion. It is a freedom of choice, but in my humble opinion, they were unnecessarily exposing themselves to risk.
Yeah.
I mean, when you see people, thousands of people, or certainly hundreds of people not wearing their mask, and in the name of having a good time, and yes, we know, some of you may be vaccinated, if not most of you, but I use that only by way of reference. I don't want to detract, but we are in a culture where we assume unnecessarily risk. And the question is, when we come to these I want to say, be as broad as saying industrial sites or industrial plants, what we are dealing with is whether or not the employers and the employees, I'm not seeking to place blame on any one individual or any one entity. We have a situation where people are exposing themselves unnecessarily to risk. So I think that is where we are. We have to face the reality. I don't want to bring any politics into it. All I would say is that I'm happy that there was a particular interview which was conducted by a fellow member of Parliament, Mr. Rushton Paria. And this took place yesterday on I believe, maybe another network, but I saw it on Facebook.
Yes.
And Mr. Paria was essentially speaking to a sort of culture whereby, we in Trinidad and Tobago, where we have accidents occurring from time to time. Unfortunately, when these accidents occur, they are not accidents which we can consider by any standards to be small accidents, because usually these accidents lead to loss of life. And therefore, if we have these type of incidents occurring from time to time, the question is whether we are taking the proactive, are we being proactive, and we are taking the necessary steps to mitigate and eliminate these kind of risks that we are talking about. So I think he would have spoken about repercussions for the entire field insofar as it relates to industrial accidents. I think he would have taken the slant of, is it that we do not spend enough in this particular instance with successive budgetary cuts in spending in health and safety lead to where we are today? So I pose that as a question, and certainly important issues to be borne in mind. So when you ask me, how is it we reach here, I think that is where we have to start. Are we really culturing something which is not ideal, is not best practice, it is not in the best interest of safety for both employer and employee, regardless of the environment that you may belong to? Yes. I think really the discussion now, Mr. Donawa, has to really look at, and this is where everybody is looking at it from, really, if you have to look at culpability, are we talking about negligence on the part of any particular entity? Are we talking about combined negligence in terms of when we're dealing with the risk, unduly taking on risk, exposing oneself to unnecessary risks? And when we talk about the law of negligence, and with your permission, I suppose, we can guide the conversation, preferably in this way.
Yeah.
There is a duty. We all know that a duty of care exists. I know this program would not allow us to talk about what is a duty of care.
But of course,
as lawyers, there's a duty of care that is owed between employer and employee, between individual A to individual B, and that is something codified in statute and common law. Question arises whether in this situation, there was a duty of care owed by Paria to these workers, and really was there a breach of that duty of care, which has resulted in the ultimate demise of these workers.
Now, Mr. Rambally,
as we proceed with the discussion, I would want to say that the facts and the timeline surrounding this incident, they are not universally accepted or admitted at this point in time. And therefore, I want to be clear where I stand in having this discussion with you, and I'm sure you as well.
Indeed.
That we in as much as we are having a discussion on mitigating risk and talking about negligence, it is hypothetical at this point in time. using what is out there in the public domain, but bearing in mind it is not meant to prejudice any kind of ongoing investigations or proceedings which may arise. So it is in fact to dub your name, and I think it is such an apt name for your program.
Yes.
To dub the name, this is in fact a strictly
legal
exploration of the surrounding issues.
Yes. Now, Mr.
So
Rambally,
I just want to say that at the outset too.
Mr. Rambally, we speak about the duty of care. Now, I know that there were some commentators, okay, we understand there's a duty of care in common law, but there are some commentators that are saying, well, of course, what about the liability, occupier's liability? Is it that while Paria as a facility has a duty of care, what about the company that was contracted that owes a duty of care to their employees? So therefore, where is the silver lining in that respect, particularly when it comes to risk management, risk mitigation, and of course following OSHA requirements, and of course following the protocols for evacuation or an emergency?
Yes. Okay, so that is an excellent question, and maybe we can treat it like this.
Yes.
First of all, yes, there is a duty of care owed by the immediate employer to these divers. And there is also a duty of care which would be owed by Paria to the company, the employer of the divers, as well as Paria having a duty of care to the divers themselves. So that is a duty of care which exists. We can't go into neighbor principle and whatever, how we can distinguish that or apply it in different circumstances. But there is a duty of care. So I am not for one moment, and I don't think anybody would for one moment say that the employer, the immediate employer of these divers would in any way not be somehow considered in terms of when you're talking about duty of care and risk and mitigation of risk and occupation liability. What happens is that, in my view, to put it very concisely, Paria would have duties at common law. And that is a duty cast on both Paria and the employer. And so that duty is to provide a safe place of work. It is a duty to provide competent staff. It is duty to provide proper plant and equipment. It may even be duty to provide, when I say even be, it's umbrella, a duty to provide a safe system of work. How that would span out in the circumstances is something which will have to be debated, as between the parties. These duties are mirrored under our OSHA Act as well. So whereas we talk about common law duty, these duties are also mirrored in the OSHA Act. And so, for example, you could look at Section 2, and I believe it is 2E of the OSHA Act, so that whereas so far as reasonably practicable, right, what it says is that in so far as reasonably practicable with respect to any place of work under an employer's control, the maintenance of it, and it must be in a condition that is safe and without risks to health, and the provision and maintenance of means of access to and egress from. That is something that would be, you take it on board in terms of what is safe and without risk. So even under the OSHA Act, you would see that when we talk about access and egress, even in the OSHA Act is making reference really to on-land situations. I haven't seen anything specifically against towards offshore or deep water, as the case may be.
Right.
It is the same principle that would obtain, and therefore the question will arise: both the employer, the immediate employer, as well as Paria being the employer of that employer of the divers, they would bear these kinds of duties. Egress. I want to say that egress, which people may, it is an English term. Yes, it is used from time to time to mean different things, but in law, it means the act of leaving or exiting a place or space.
Yeah.
And therefore, what happens to be the issue is that the center of this particular tragedy, the question is who would have been in control of the particular area.
Yeah.
Before I go further, it is something that I actually came across in terms of doing some general reading.
Yes.
And what it says is that you have courts which have said that although generally a person is not responsible for the negligence of an independent contractor. Now, these are terms that you, Mr. Donawa, and I would be extremely familiar with. But the persons out there, you would look at the employer as Paria, you would look at the independent contractor as the immediate employer of the divers.
Yes.
So what the law has generally been in terms of, looking at these situations, and I'm talking about high-risk situations now, it says, although generally a person is not responsible for the negligence of an independent contractor, meaning that Paria will not generally be responsible for any negligence on the part of LMCS. The question is, it says, where the work involved is of an extra hazardous and inherently dangerous operation, creating special risks of harm. In such situations, the person who orders the work to be done cannot relieve himself from liability by employing someone else to do it. And he is just as responsible for the negligence of the independent contractor as if he had done the work himself.
Yes.
And I say that there because here it is Paria would be the one responsible for the area. So if we're talking occupational liability, that space and that area is under the control of Paria. This company could not take it upon itself and said they are going down there. It would have to be specifically at the request of. Regardless of whether there would be tendering procedures and all of these things, the point is Paria is in control of that space. And therefore, when you're talking about an inherently dangerous type of work, or the nature of work itself carries this extra hazard. The court is saying that, but just by virtue of Paria having employed this LMCS, this independent contractor, and I'm using the word independent contractor loosely here, but
yes.
If they are deemed to be independent contractors, it does not absolve Paria from any liability. So where systems, I think the point we have to get at now, having established that both Paria and LMCS would have specific duties of care, were systems in place to allow these trapped divers? And I think that's what people want to know.
Yes, what are the
systems in place to allow the trapped divers to have a safe exit or egress from this particular point where they were conducting the works? Or alternatively, a way we can look at it is that were systems in place to allow for a rescue, bearing in mind that we are talking about a rescue in these circumstances must be time sensitive. So OSHA Act treats with confined spaces of work, and it speaks of safety requirements that are mandated. But we must ask, were there breach of those duties specifically? The duty to provide a safe system of work, inclusive of proper rescue plan and personnel.
Mr. Rambally, let's touch on the rescue plan. Now,
yes.
There's one survivor, and this is because from my reading that they would have whoever rescued that survivor would have breached whatever protocol to dive in there and rescue them, and then subsequently they were stopped. Now, I know I was reading an article by an expert, Simeon Humphrey, who stated that, well, while yes, the divers or these rescue persons would have done what they were supposed to do, it is up to the occupier, which is Paria, to activate that emergency plan right away. And it should not have taken 48 hours or 24 hours to start that emergency activation. So
Correct.
Therefore, in that regard, how does that emergency procedure take effect, especially when you have external parties wishing to assist? Then they would say, well, there's policy in place.
So maybe very quickly, let's take it in steps, right?
Yes.
So for argument's sake, let us presume that Paria did everything right. For argument's sake, let's presume they did everything right. That all the categories that we are talking about, duty of care, safe system of work, competent and skilled staff, all of these things, you put the ticks by them, right? What happens is that we still have that fundamental question. Did they actually employ an acceptable rescue operation? So that is the starting point. Before we get to the part where we are talking about you had people who may have been able to go in and effect some rescue plan and conduct, certain attempts to rescue these persons. So the fundamental question, did they actually employ an acceptable rescue operation? So I have heard the terminology global subsea, whether that is the name of the rescue plan, whether that is the name of some international agency and stuff. I am a little bit unclear at this point in time. Right. The experts will have to speak to that. But it seems as though there was a plan there was a plan that they had and that they deployed. We may disagree with the plan, but there was a plan.
Okay.
If they had this rescue plan on paper, was there a disconnect between the rescue plan and bringing it into operation? Because this is where the timing comes into play. And I will get to the timing as well. Hopefully we get into the timing.
Yes.
So it was there a disconnect between the plan on paper and bringing it into operation? Did they trigger the rescue operations in a timely manner? Now, I want to say that some of the reports indicating that the rescue team was not sent in because it was felt, and again, this is based on reports, it was felt that there was a low likelihood of survival coupled with a high risk of danger to the rescuers. Now, I want to say that this is a crucial decision to make, and this is all the more reason why we have to have a very swift and effective independent investigation, because we will have to determine on what basis was that decision arrived at. If the rescuers were likely to be in danger, was that a sufficient rescue plan in the first place? Yes. Or was this supposed danger to the rescuers created by the natural lapse and effluxion of time? So everything that we are talking about, it is time sensitive. Was there Paria's tardiness, right? Was there tardiness in responding? Now, the reports also show that other people knew of it and were responding in a timely manner. And that is where we will get to the rescue, right? That they responded, this resulted in the actual rescue of one trapped person. Now, Paria's rescue plan, when we determined whether it was timely or not, it could not be timely if there were other alternatives, bearing in mind that all the time that they were taking, things were just ticking away. You had to make these decisions. You had a duty to reassess. So I want to make this clear when we're looking at this, Mr. Donawa.
Yes. Just
like the breath of these men trapped in a hazardous environment, right? Being, as the seconds go by, being, eliminated, their survival instinct is slowly but surely being, whittled away.
And then you have the oxygen as well. There's
we have to look at it, on the surface, whether, Paria's response is time sensitive. Now, it gets to this point now. If we are to weigh it now, there was a plan according to Paria. We have to look at it from the point of view of they had a duty to reassess their positions. So even if they felt, as I have indicated already, that the risk was too high to send in anybody, right? Because that could create another problem that these divers may not, be able to manage to combat. The rescuing team would not be able to come back out. The question is now whether or not you had a duty to reassess that when the first diver came out and having rescued one member of the team. So, yes. So I think it was Mr. Kurban, if I remember the names correctly, who was the person who dived in,
yes,
and rescued one Mr. Bujram, if I remember the names correctly, but somebody did go in. This is what he had to say. So here it is, you are on surface. You ought to have a rescue plan in place. According to them, they were effecting some kind of rescue plan. Whether it is timely or not, we will have to talk about that and deal with that. But certainly at a point in time, a rescuer went in there, braved and traversed all of the risks that are involved, came out successful with one diver. This surviving diver said to this rescuer, go back in. The person who was pushing me and pushing me to come out of the pipe was your father. You need to go back in there and save him. Now, you certainly had a duty to reassess what was taking place. Now, Mr. Donawa, you and I know that you have a duty cast on a Good Samaritan. And in different jurisdictions, the law is different with respect to Good Samaritans.
And let's leave it our
Good Samaritan may, in some jurisdictions, it said has a duty to help a person who is in harm. And in this particular instance, the rescuer was definitely trying to assist as a Good Samaritan and going back in. Yes, one of the divers down there trapped was a relative and a close one at it. But what Paria should have done, and this is what will have to be determined as a matter of mixed question of fact and law, Paria should have allowed the attempted rescue to take place. And I think that is where the negligence will come in. If they were bound to have an egress plan and it was not working, and this is where the seconds are ticking away, and these men's lives are going with those seconds as well, in failing to reassess their plan, their rescue plan, if at all one existed, they ought to have allowed the Good Samaritan. So you have a plan. It has not conjured up anything whatsoever in terms of assisting these men to have increased survival instincts down there, right, being trapped. And nor does it even help in any way to say, well, okay, we are closer to having something guaranteed, where we are going to go in there and we have a 90% chance of getting them out. Nothing like that. What you do have is you have a survivor, a rescuer, bringing out one diver who is a survivor. The survivor is giving first-hand information. I think there was an overriding feature now, and that is where the law and the facts will have to play off.
Yeah.
There's a mixed question of fact and law. And I am saying that hypothetically, I would think that there would be an overriding feature now in the law which would allow the Good Samaritan to go back in. That would take place. And I want to say that this is not to sensationalize anything.
Understood.
But permit me to say this. Why didn't Paria allow the diver to go in? Apparently there was, and I'm using the terminology that I'm reading in the newspapers and in the releases. Why did you plug that potential entry to allow the divers to go back, the rescuers to go in there now and attempt to effect a second rescue and possibly a third and possibly a fourth? Why didn't you do that? And this is where people are asking the questions in law, and I'm not sensationalizing it. People have lost. One family has only just gotten the deceased body of their loved
but
one.
these are
I'm not sensationalizing this, but the question is being asked.
Questions.
Did Paria have the capability, and having exercised the capability, did they make a decision that, look, the risk was too low or for them to go in there to rescue anyone? We are better off letting them die down there and then get the bodies out. Did they calculate that risk? Because if they calculated that risk, and that is what was a decision on their part, allow the men to die, the questions are being asked, did you calculate also that it would have less damages to pay out to persons when after they have died, as opposed to if they lived, but they lived with permanent injuries and had to have future care going forward? These are real questions, and this is what is upsetting the population. But I throw that not to sensationalize anything, but to show that, look, at least we are aware of what is taking place in terms of the discussion moving forward. I'm sorry that I went on, but I know you were trying to interject.
That's okay. That's okay. So many questions and little answers. Of course, we have the 5-team investigation. Why do you think that we need to retain persons from abroad to investigate something like this? Do we not have confidence in our own experts?
Well, I am not suggesting, if I give that impression, I'm not suggesting that we need a team from abroad. But certainly what you need is an experienced team. And there's no point, Mr. Donawa, in establishing a team that lacks two things. One, the expertise. And two, I know it will have to have different persons from different fields forming the investigating team. So I mean that across the board. It must contain the requisite expertise. And two, there must be the confidence there in this investigation team.
Yes.
If that confidence can only be sought out and obtained by virtue of having, persons from out of the jurisdiction, so be it. This is not any, small accident where a man, and I don't mean it in the terms of a man losing his finger is a small accident, right? Loss of a limb is big in its own way. I'm saying that it is not where somebody can continue to live, albeit with assistance, with a prosthetic or anything like that. I am saying that you have lost outright the lives of men. And we need to get to the bottom of this, because you do not want to have a repeat. Indeed. Too often we are seeing these industrial accidents happening to the proportions where people are losing their lives. And we can't have that. This is not even a loss of a singular life, which would be bad in its own way. This is loss of four. Plus lives, and you're talking about something. One thing as well, we have to understand that we are dealing with an industry here where persons are going in to maintain pipelines. They are bounded to use duty of care, to comply with statutory requirements. We all know this. The operators of the pipelines, as Paria, must operate and maintain that pipeline. Having regard, this is outside of the accident there. They must have due regard for the rights of others under a continuing duty to properly maintain that pipeline. So even apart from these immediate persons who have lost their lives, generally Paria has this duty in respect of pipelines. This is only on the law of when you're talking about how you maintain pipelines. So in addition to any liability that may be, I want to say, predicated on negligence that we are discussing here, liability for injury caused by construction or whatever it is, maintenance or operation of the pipeline that we are talking about now, they have a continuing duty to ensure that their plant and equipment does not become a nuisance. So it is in their interest, it is in the interest of our nation to ensure that we have a proper investigation, independent, and confidence must be ascribed to it, that everybody can say, look, this is the way forward. Yes. So yes, it will assist in determining the immediate circumstances, but there's no point in having an investigation where it is doubtful as to what can be implemented moving forward and people don't have the confidence in it. We need to have that moving forward. So we are talking about these circumstances, but these circumstances must serve as fair warning, as the past instances which did not seem to serve fair warning on us. We must ensure that moving forward, we really get this thing right. We cannot afford to lose lives like this.
Indeed, I totally agree with you, Mr. Rambally. Unfortunately, we are very much out of time, and I think I think it's a discussion. I know we as attorneys tend to speak a lot, but this is very important, and I think your knowledge and imparting what you would have stated was very, very beneficial. I would like you back again, possibly with your time. I know you have constituents to see about, etc., but you are attorney as well. So thank you so much, Mr. Rambally, for gracing Strictly Legal set, and we do appreciate you, sir.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Donawa, and it will be my pleasure to come on back to discuss this matter as well as any others. But I'm really willing to make myself available for this one.
Yes, because we have to continue on the relief sanctions, OSHA, etc. So thank you so much, sir. So guys, it's a wrap. You have been watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. I am your host, Rondell Donawa. Please view us online, WESN CC, as well as our podcast at Strictly Legal with Rondell Donawa. See you another time. God bless. Condolences once again to the families. We can do better. Goodbye.